Hello, my name is Jason. Welcome back to I Have a Story. Today's the kickoff of the new week, and it's My Life Monday. And to be totally honest with you, I am not ready for this at all. I'm totally winging it. I have no notes. I don't take notes. I don't know the best way to present this and do this, and so much has happened. I don't even know where to start, other than from the beginning. And even from the beginning, so much has happened. This is a struggle for me all the way around. But I guess to start out, I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, and I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My parents were, I don't know where things went wrong, and this is part of where I'm here to talk about with people. You got to talk and communicate. I watched my dad, with whatever pain it is that's inside of him, just tear away at him, and in return cause him to tear away at everybody else. One of the biggest questions I asked my dad: why did you have a family if you never actually wanted one? Because he didn't. He treated my mom like absolute garbage. And it was roughly just about 9 years ago or so, 10 years ago, I was talking to one of his neighbors, and the neighbors talk about how my dad treats my mom. Two biggest things I learned from my dad, and about all I learned from my dad, was how not to be a dad and how not to be a father, or how not to be a husband. As a kid, my dad was one who picked on us and made fun of us and treated us like actual animals. He really did. He's one of those dads that sits down in a chair with a bag of chips, and what do kids do? I want a chip, and he'd throw them on the floor and make us eat them off the floor like a dog. I don't even know, I really don't know what, hopefully this gets easier for me and I get better at this as I go along. But whatever tore away at my dad made him tear away at us. And I really don't get it, because I'll tell you, my dad does have a good heart. I've seen it in him. But his head's got it messed up. And again, I don't know what happened in his life that made him like that. I can't imagine that he was always like that, because I can't imagine my mom would have ever gotten with him if he had been like that prior. And who knows, maybe my mom had an affair, maybe he had an affair. I don't know what happened. But I can't imagine my dad was like that. My mom married him, and that was who she married. I really don't. My dad praised people like Al Bundy as a kid. That was his idol. Because that's such an idol, right? Right. He didn't want anything to do with us kids. Pushed us away. We weren't allowed to make a sound. If you made a sound, you got in trouble. And I have to question, as an adult now, looking back, how things were as a kid. Well, I didn't have to, because I brought my son there, and my dad didn't want any of his grandkids at his house. In the future down the road, he never wanted to ever see his grandkids, and has never met half of his grandkids. That's later in life. So as a kid, having a father that was like he was, and my dad was one that not only took it out on us, took it out on the neighborhood. All the neighborhood kids. My dad was one that if a ball came in his yard, and I'm talking, we lived in a shoebox neighborhood. I'll try to pull up a picture of the house I grew up in and put it on here. But we grew up in a shoebox neighborhood, 50 by 80 lots, if they were even that big. I'm not exactly sure. They might have been smaller. But it was a neighborhood where you sit in your living room and pass wind, your neighbor smells it through their window. You literally can walk between houses and spread your arms and touch both houses, and you can't even spread, as an adult, spread your arms and make it between the houses, except for on the driveway side. And it was not a terrible neighborhood from my understanding when my parents first moved there, but it really got rough and went downhill. had 3 bars within a 1 block, not even a 1 block, half a block radius of my house. Find drunk people in your yard, needles and drugs and paraphernalia and stuff throughout the neighborhood. My dad was one, though, that, kids' balls came in the yard, he'd take them, and when we finally moved out of that house, which was between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, there's a closet in the basement that was just full of balls, full of them. So then, him treating the other kids in the neighborhood the way he treated us made other kids pick on us even more. Because we didn't already get picked on enough by what the rest of the neighborhood saw with the way they treated us. Both of my parents. And I don't even call them parents. I'm using those terms right now, but I've lost all connection with them having been my parents. They're not parents by no means. So for now I will call them my parents, but later on that's going to change. Because they're not parents. They never were. They let whatever controlled their life and consumed them. And the way I see it is my mom, she let what my dad turned her into come out on us. And as you're going to see through these videos, if you haven't already seen, that I'm a free-thinking, spirited person. My mom, this always hurt me. My mom, God, this always crushed me. My mom, she hated it. Because that meant she had to talk to me and spend time with me and do something with me and try to understand me. And she didn't want that. She just wanted me to be who she wanted me to be. And I'm going to beat it into you. And when I say beat it into you, I remember the day my mom sat down on my bed and bent me over her knee and beat me. And I stood up and she said, "Why aren't you crying?" I said, "Because it doesn't hurt no more." She bent me over again and gave it everything she had. I got up, I still wasn't crying. She called my dad in. He made sure I cried. I found out at 42 years old that I have severe, any surgeon who's been in my body said that they've never seen anything like it. They actually sent, in 2018, an investigator to my room after a surgery to find out and investigate why I had such damage in my body. My dad, honestly, it's the only holiday I remember him celebrating my entire childhood. It was the day he found something he could beat my brother and I with that didn't break. That was like the happiest day I remember in my dad's life. Of my years with him, the happiest day I can ever remember him being. That and the day he got a keg refrigerator. Not because he had friends that drank and had parties. He needed a full-size keg just for himself. Not to mention the bottles that were sitting on the counter. Fifth, liquor, which later in life I found. And started drinking. And he started getting smart and putting marks on it. Well, it's easy enough. I just fill that up with water and top it back off. He didn't know the difference. Especially when he's already as drunk as he is. So my dad had what he called the board. It sat right in between him and my mom's chair, and it was a taped up masking tape, and it was pretty much the dimensions of like a 1x2 and about 2 feet long. Give or take, trying to remember as a child, seeing it as a kid. It wasn't quite, maybe 2 inches wide. Maybe not quite an inch wide, but it didn't even bend when it hit you, I know that. If it wasn't for my grandparents, I would not at all be the man I am today. Because I had beautiful, wonderful grandparents. My grandpa, my dad's dad passed away when us kids were in school. We were all still in elementary school, and I mean, to tell you how my parents raised us, this is how we found out the day my grandpa passed away. I remember my dad picking us up from the babysitters, which I'll be doing a video just on babysitters, because what we experienced with babysitters, who would put their kid through that, other than parents who were only worried about spending money on themselves and not taking care of their kids. That's another video coming about just the babysitters that is going to astound you, especially in today's world. But I don't know whatever was rotting away with my dad, because we never talked about it, and it's part of why I talk about people talking and why I'm here to get people talking, because you can't live with that all inside of you. It just devastates everybody's life, and you can't be devastating children's lives. And what it did to my brother, my God. My brother came out 10 times worse than my dad, and there's many reasons for it. Again, that's a video down the road. My grandparents, my grandpa was, my mom's dad was a military vet, and we didn't even find out until after he passed away that he actually served in 2 wars. My mom never even knew that he served in 2 wars. We knew of the Vietnam War, but we never knew of any other, or Korean War, I'm sorry. He served in the Korean War, and he served in another war that I honestly didn't even know existed. It was obviously, you know, a small war. I remember his stories and telling me about it, and his being a child and being lost in the world and not knowing what to do. That's why he went into the service, because he didn't, especially way back then, life was not as many options as what it does today. I'll get on to my grandfather later on in another video. My grandma was the sweetest, most humble. I mean, my grandparents were both humble. My grandma was the biggest, sweetest woman I've ever known. And they distilled in me. It's part of where my patriotic values come from. My grandpa was a vice president of a VFW hall. My grandma was a treasurer. And as a child, throughout my childhood, and all the pain and all the bad, what do you hold on to? The pain or the bad, or the only thing that feels good? And I clung to what felt good. So being a patriot and everything I learned living in a VFW hall, what I learned from my grandparents, block out all the pain, and I rose that to the top. I mean, to tell you me, all the way back in high school, I dated girls that they pulled up in a foreign car, I wouldn't go out with them. I refused to sit in one, ride in one, even though I've owned a couple in my life out of 100 vehicles that I've owned. It was because I got stuck in a position that the last one I had was given to me and donated to me, and I had no car. I wanted to burn that every time I sat inside of it. It ended up burning on its own. Well, not on its own, but it burnt with my house. Part of that felt good. Part of it felt like that's where that car deserved to go. It's where they all deserve to go. Tired of being told being a patriot means racist. Being a patriot isn't racism. It's pride in your country. That's how we grew and became a wonderful country, was pride. So I held on to what my grandparents and what I saw with my grandparents, because that was the only thing that felt good. And I did not want the darkness to consume me like it did my brother. My brother is one of the most horrendous people I've ever met in my entire life. I love him to death. He's my brother. It's been, God, 13 years now at least since I've talked to him, because his life is so dangerous. It made my life so dangerous, and it's so dark. I couldn't lose my kids over it, which, you know, I did everything I could not to lose my kids and do all the right things, even step away from people that I loved that could have really had serious effects on my relationship with me and my kids, or losing them altogether, and was used against me in court because my first wife knows how he is and who he is and what he is. So it was all used against me to take my kid away from me, because I already walked away from him to begin with and did what I was supposed to do. Again, more stories for later. As a kid, our neighbors' kids, we got picked on a lot because just to who my parents were and what they did to everybody else in our neighborhood. The way my dad treated us, and that's part of why today and why I've so many decades now stand up and fight for so many people, because nobody stood up and fought for us. Everybody watches my dad and my mom beat the snot out of us as kids. Not feed us. My brother and I hiding underneath the slide in the backyard and hiding behind the garage eating dog food because we're hungry. But if we get caught with dog food, we're going to get in trouble too. If it wasn't for my grandparents, we would have had no childhood. None whatsoever. Absolutely nothing. My dad could afford 13 cars, 2 motorcycles, a couple boats, but couldn't afford to put shoes on our feet. Oh, don't forget, got to get another refill on the keg of beer and 4 packs of cigarettes today, and who knows what other habits he even had. I don't even know. I know we had gardens in our basement, which knowing what I know now makes me question what all they were growing. Were those really tomato plants? And yes, I grew with my oldest son being young. He never ever once saw it, never even knew it was taking place. I guarantee you, at a teenager now, almost 20 years old, he'll stand here and tell you he never even knew that I was growing it. Because I know as an adult, I'm allowed to do adult things, but I don't bring my kids into it. Oh wait, what world am I talking to again? That's right, I forgot. Now we turn kids and sexualize children publicly. Disgusting. So when I stand before you, and you've heard through my videos about self-esteem, my parents beat it out of me as a kid. I don't have any self-esteem. My wives beat it out of me and literally, not just figuratively, literally and figuratively beat it out of me my whole life. And as a kid, just like my boys, when they start getting into things, because they want attention. Come play with me, Daddy. Why, when I started over again, I felt guilty every second being apart from my kids. And now, having not seen them in so long, part of why my story is going to lead down the path it does. I've seen too much and lived too much, felt too much, and I live in too much pain now to want to continue living. I guess that's long enough for this video. I don't want to make these videos an hour long. But I'm here to tell you a story that I don't know that you'll ever hear another one like it. Nobody else has ever heard my stories, heard anything like it. Spent a couple months talking to therapists, counselors, and psychologists, and at the end they go, I've never heard anything like this. And then, just like the one I have now, they question until they sit by my side and watch it. No, this is my life. I moved here to get away from all of it and leave it all behind me. Come here and raise my children. See this boat that you've been seeing in the background behind me? I got that for my kids 3 years ago. The idea was to turn that into a pirate ship, because what kids don't love pirates? I've got all the stuff to build a lookout tower, and from there it was going to be scaffolding through the trees and out to a tree house. and they were going to build it with me side by side the whole way. Sure, might take years for us to make the full accomplishment. I even have zip lines for him to come down out of the treehouse with. And the stuff's just been sitting here rotting for years without him. I wanted to be the dad my dad never was. Couldn't even touch anything any other dad could ever touch. I wanted to be the best. And part of it is because of what my life was as a child, without a doubt. We would not be the people we are today if not what our history has led us to. Some people, they chose their path. Me and others, we were put on it. My counselor just sent it to me yesterday. We don't know why the Lord put you on the path He did, but there's a reason. We don't know why, but we're going to figure it out. So when you've heard what I've already been talking through all of these videos, I am just getting started. I'm going to tell you what all this stuff did to my family, my brother, my sister, my mom, the people around us, my grandparents. Like, we were very young, and my mom and dad were supposed to go out for their anniversary. My mom took us over to our grandparents' house to wait for my dad to come pick her up after he got off work. Only my dad didn't show up. I sat and watched my mom and grandma cry, my grandpa upset. That was the last attempt I even made at one. I was probably roughly, give or take, around 8 years old at the time. I can honestly look back and never, ever, not one time, ever can I remember 1 ounce of affection from my dad to my mom. Not one. Instead, his nickname that he called her and had everybody call her was Punker, because that's just such, that came from the heart, didn't it? Punker. What a name. Never understood it. Even as a kid, I'd looked at it and like, what does that even mean? How did that, what meaning ever came from that? How'd that ever start? My dad, who thought it was great to have children as slaves, go get me another beer. Don't want to hear a peep out of you. You want something to eat? Shut up and get out. You were going to get slapped? People, even in high school, laughed at us. Even my sister's husband today, at least as far as I know that they're still married. It's been so many years since I've talked to her. He used to laugh about coming to our house. Never seen a house you're not allowed to, you walk into and you're not allowed to take something out of the refrigerator? Really? You're not even allowed to get drink out of the refrigerator? No, we got water. That's what we're allowed. We can open that cupboard that has cups. Sink that's got water. That's it. People laughed at us. You know, my dad pissed people off. They took it out on us. And everybody around watched, and nobody did a damn thing. Which is why I stand up for people today, because nobody did it for me. I'm going to edit this into and add a little bit more to this. Like I said, there's so much to talk about when I was a kid, and try to keep these short. My parents didn't want nothing to do with being parents, and when they had to be one, they just took it out on us. As kids, we weren't bad kids, we were kids. And especially me, I wanted my dad to spend time with me. That's when I'd get into stuff, because, well, that's what kids do. Part of why I talk so much about spending time with your kid. I tell you some of the things we got beat for. Not only were we not allowed to have food, we literally weren't allowed to have food. I remember a day when I was 2 doors down, 3rd door down, and a new kid was in the neighborhood, and that was the neighborhood hangout. They had a double lot, and their parents were cool, and they had video games, and everybody, that was the hangout. So Ricky goes inside and comes out with a bag of chips. Everybody's sitting around eating chips, and the new kid said, "Why isn't Jason eating chips?" Everybody starts laughing because Jason's not allowed to. Then start getting poked at. Kid didn't understand. So I ate a chip. 1 chip. My mom came down, And then the kid even sat there, your mom's not watching you. Yes, she is. She's got eyes everywhere. And this is, my dad even tapped our phone lines back when you had to put a suction cup to a phone. I found it behind his bed in his bedroom. Ate one chip. My mom came down and beat me in front of everybody and drugged me home. When I tell you we got beaten as kids and it's starting to rain again, it was just for being kids. It wasn't because we were bad. Everywhere we went, all we ever heard were those were the best behaved kids we've ever seen. Everywhere, all of our lives. But yet when we got home, our parents still found something to beat us for. Then my head starts going blank and talking about this stuff and not knowing what to say and not even wanting to talk about it to begin with and having to dig it up. But I'm going to keep trudging along and trying the best I can.